Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 91. Symbiotic. Michael was surprised with the king's straightforwardness. "That easy?" he asked him. "I thought the dwarven kingdom was closed off." Byru nodded his head, keeping his arm outstretched for Michael to take. "It was. But what you've shown me in this village made me understand why our kingdom hasn't prospered these past millennia. I thought that I was protecting our kingdom by closing it off. But now I understand that we've just impeded our own progress. So Michael, help us and we will help you." Michael always wanted to have a good relationship with the dwarven kingdom. He just never thought it would be this easy. After all, he hadn't even done anything yet. Their king voluntarily visited their village and made up his own mind. He smiled and took the dwarven king's hand. The two leaders of civilizations, one budding and one established, shook hands to symbolize their cooperation. The dwarven king laughed and heartily smacked Michael's back. "Ha ha ha! This is the beginning of a fruitful endeavor," he said. "And before we sign a contract, I want to invite you into our kingdom and see what we have to offer. It's only fair." Michael would not say no to that. Seeing the inner workings of the dwarven kingdom would allow him to see what no human had ever seen before. He was especially curious as to how they produced the best metals and crafts in the world. "Let's go," Michael said excitedly. The next day, Michael and Byru journeyed forth to the dwarven kingdom using the automobile, with Fudge as their driver. Of course, before they left, the dwarven king asked a favor from Michael to bring with him crates and crates of beer for his collection. Michael agreed so long as he paid for the costs using Damascus steel. "Ha ha ha! If that's what it takes, then I shall send a shipment of Damascus steel every month in exchange for reserving my own production of beer," Byru said. After a few days, they finally reached the capital of the dwarven kingdom and were met with a lot of weird stares and amazed expressions as Michael finally showcased the true worth of the automobile. "A carriage with no horse? What is that metal craft? Is it alive? And the name on the side of the door, Reborn? Is that the same Reborn as the beer I'm drinking right now?" Whenever they went, a lot of dwarves stopped hammering their tools and walked out of their houses to follow the strange carriage. Finally, the automobile stopped in front of the royal castle where they were met with the anxious stares of the king's advisors. The dwarven king first stepped out of the door, garnering gasps from the dwarves that crowded the streets. But they would have never expected the next person to get out of the car. It was a human. From the looks of it, the dwarven king and the human were on good terms, with their king welcoming the human as if he were his guest. "Your Highness, what is the meaning of this? Why have you brought a human with you?" his advisors asked hurriedly. The dwarven king presented Michael to his advisors and the crowd. "This is Michael, and he is the leader of the paradise in the parched lands. Not only that, he is the mind that brought us the nectar of the gods, beer," he proclaimed, with his voice booming to the entire capital. "I have brought him here to establish an alliance between us, allowing us to exchange resources, knowledge, and even culture. Do not worry, my dear citizens. Once this alliance is successful, you will all be able to buy beer without having to hide from the authorities. You will learn the charm of baseball. And most of all, you will be able to purchase your own automobile like this one. This alliance will bring forth a revolution in our kingdom. We will prosper. Together." The dwarven king raised Michael's hand to the crowd. Clap, 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 clap. The crowd began to cheer and shout, which was mostly started by a few drunkards who celebrated the fact that they could buy all the beer they wanted. But soon after, More and more dwarves were caught up in the celebrations. They had seen the wonder of this strange metal contraption called an automobile, and as craftsmen themselves, they appreciated the complexity of the machine. And of course, by this point, the rumor of the paradise in the parched lands had already spread far and wide to the Dwarven kingdom. They have heard wondrous stories from that place, but they've always refrained from going because of the restrictions in their kingdom. But now, with this alliance, they could finally visit this paradise for themselves. We want beer. We want to visit paradise in the parched lands. Hooray! Hooray! After the celebrations died down, the king led Michael to the different parts of the Dwarven territory. He showed him the mines, where the dwarves dug up precious metals. It would then get sent to the forges, where the craftsmen would make it into a specific product. Finally, he was led to the very castle, which was built upon a giant active volcano spewing out lava and smoke at all times. But strangely enough, Michael noticed that the smoke didn't pollute the entire kingdom. It somehow vanished into the clouds without ever a trace of it coming back down to contaminate the ground. He asked the king about this, and as it turned out, there was kind of a symbiotic relationship happening between the smoke coming from the volcano and the clouds up above. The clouds are made up of simple creatures, too small to even see in the naked eye, and have no complex thoughts to make them sentient. They sustain themselves by consuming the hot smoke of our volcano, and in turn, the creatures rain down elemental mana upon our kingdom, making it rich with magic. Michael couldn't believe his eyes. Just like the king said, this place was indeed rich with elemental mana such as water, air, and earth, even though the kingdom was mostly made out of forges that produce fire mana. There should have been an imbalance where fire mana was dominant and water mana was scarce, just like in the parched lands. But in this place there was equilibrium. His mind suddenly lit up in a flurry of ideas upon learning of the existence of these creatures. These clouds could solve the lack of water mana in the parched lands. Chapter 92. Nation of Reborn. Michael guessed that these invisible creatures were a form of bacteria that mutated into a magical creature. Just like how this world had magical humans and monstrous demihumans alike, it should have been obvious that there were also bacteria that evolved into a different species. Fortunately, this specific type of bacteria lived upon the clouds and sustained themselves through polluted smoke. Not only that, they also produced an abundance of mana as a side effect. If the village had these types of clouds above, then they would bring water mana to the entire territory, no longer making it a desert. He has always been hesitant to spread the use of petroleum fuel due to the harmful pollution that it produced. He had been using his own magic to counteract the effects of the pollution by himself, but with these bacteria clouds he didn't have to do that anymore. Michael immediately asked the Dwarven king how he obtained these bacteria clouds. "You want one for your village? Sure. We can give you a cloud seedling that can grow bigger than a mountain. Though you'll need a lot of smoke for it to grow properly, or else it will just dissipate in the wind. And don't expect that your cloud will bless your lands with lots of elemental mana at the start. It took us thousands of years before our cloud got to this point." Michael was overjoyed once he heard this. They didn't have a volcano to sustain these special bacteria clouds, but they did have a steam turbine, which produced tons of smoke. As the village advanced in technology, it would incorporate petroleum oil as its main source of energy. The smoke produced by those factories would only serve to turn the territory into a better, healthier place. With a greater cloud, the more elemental mana would rain down on the village. Someday, the territory would not just experience summer throughout the year. There could be a rainy season, a winter season, and even spring. He was now more sure than ever that allying himself with the Dwarven kingdom was one of the best decisions he could have ever made. "Are you ready to sign the official contract?" the Dwarven king asked, and Michael answered with a resounding yes. They visited the throne room where the king's advisors and a couple of other high-ranking dwarves witnessed the signing ceremony of their alliance. Michael and the Dwarven king sat on opposite sides of a table, with their contracts in hand. "Your village and your company Reborn will be welcomed at our gates. You can sell your products at reasonable rates without any problem," the king said, reading the contents of their contract. "And the Dwarven kingdom will be our village's provider of all things metal such as steel, iron, and other such materials. And most of all, we are allowed to buy and distribute Damascus steel from your kingdom, Michael recited. The two men nodded, satisfied with the base agreement between their two territories. I would also like to employ your village in creating a road between the two territories. We will handle the materials, you will handle the work, the king proposed after talking with his advisors. Michael quickly agreed to this. Now that there was an alliance between the two territories, it would be a lot more convenient for citizens to easily traverse the distance without problem. He was already planning on proposing this agreement in the first place because he wanted automobiles to show their true worth as vehicles. And that could only be done through creating a flat road. I have another proposition, Michael said with a curious smile on his face. I want to build a train system that connects our territories. The Dwarven King and his advisors on the other side of the table showed confused looks on their faces. They had never heard of this train that Michael was talking about. The train is a convenient transport system that will connect the parched lands and this kingdom, needing only 1 day's worth of travel, Michael explained. The dwarves gasped, unable to believe that it would only take less than a day to travel all the way to the parched lands. And if Michael hadn't shown them his incredible inventions that defied reality, they would have denounced his words as nothing more than a lie. Is this true, Michael? How can you build such a fast vehicle? The king asked. And in turn, Michael also asked that same question to his trusted personal AI assistant. ChatJK2, can you tell me how to build a train? Certainly. I have constructed a railroad system that efficiently connects the Dwarven Kingdom to the parched lands. I will download the schematics to your brain in 3, 2, 1. Suddenly, tons of information washed over his mind, giving him everything he needed to know to build a train from scratch. He also saw a bird's eye view of the completed project, with the trains running at full speed and full of dwarves excited to spend the holidays at the paradise in the parched lands. If you can build such a vehicle, then this partnership will become even more fruitful than I thought. If we can exchange materials within a day, then our commerce will prosper, the king exclaimed. His eyebrows flared from excitement. Even his advisors couldn't help but nod their heads fervently at the thought of what this alliance would bring them. Quick, let us sign this agreement, the king said, already dipping the quill into the ink. Michael did so as well. This contract was flexible as well, so if they wanted to change or add a few more things to their agreement, then they could easily mend it. He also had ChatJK2 parse through the agreement and it found no loopholes or weaknesses that any party could exploit. I almost forgot. For this agreement to work, you must give your territory an official name, one that would mark its place on a map, the king said. Michael didn't have to think hard about the name of his territory. He knew that the village was growing far too big to even be called a village at this point, so he was already planning on giving his territory a proper name. Reborn. My territory will be called the Nation of Reborn. Chapter 93. The Godforge. With the signing of the contract, the alliance between the Dwarven Kingdom and the Nation of Reborn was sealed in stone. This was a momentous occasion, one that would be written in the history books as the start of the Reborn Nation's global dominance. But that was a story for another time. Right now, it was a celebration. The dwarves prepared a sumptuous feast, with ale and beer ready for all to drink and eat. Michael talked with the other dwarves about the possibility of creating a Reborn Company headquarters stationed near the capital, and they agreed immediately. He planned for someone like Baldric to handle all the company business in the Dwarven Kingdom. Of course, he would have to coordinate with Castell about the acquisition of products because she was still the main CEO of the Reborn business. As he talked to more and more dwarves, all kinds of plans were born. For example, the kingdom ordered a large shipment of concrete to supply the rebuilding of the walls around their kingdom. This was where their alliance showed its benefits. The Dwarven Kingdom would send more lime and other such materials to the Reborn Nation. Then they would turn that into concrete, which would then be sent back to the Dwarven Kingdom to be used. That was the current priority of the kingdom, so that was what they tackled for now. But there were other major future projects that they would like to embark on after the construction of the walls. For example, they wanted to implement the plumbing and the electrical system in the entire Dwarven Kingdom. The plumbing system would be easy since they already have their own source of water. Michael just needed to create another sewer system and connect them to pipes around the Dwarven Kingdom. This would take a lot of time and effort, but it could be done with the cooperation of both territories. After that, they would implement the electrical system. The Dwarven King wanted Michael to connect the electrical lines from the Reborn nation all the way to their kingdom. Just like the plumbing system, the kingdom would pay a monthly fee to the Reborn company to supply electricity to all Dwarven homes. To make that work, Michael would have to upgrade the current steam turbine to accommodate the increased demand for electricity. Thankfully, the Dwarven King promised to supply him with all the Damascus steel that he needed, allowing Michael to create a bigger and more efficient generator for the turbine. Although it was a lot of work, the money they would generate from this business would truly be astronomical. The party went on, and Michael went outside the balcony of the castle to observe the Dwarven Kingdom in all its glory. Unlike their nation, which was lit up by light bulbs, this kingdom was instead lit up by forges and smiths that kept its fire lively through the night. There were celebrations all around, and all the beer that he brought with him was being spread and drunk in the taverns. "I never tire of seeing this sight," the Dwarven King said as he leaned on the balcony and looked out into his kingdom. Then he turned to Michael. "Now that we have officially become allies, there is something that I want to show you." The serious expression on the usually boisterous and drunk king told Michael that this was an important matter. "What is it?" he asked. "It is the reason why we have settled in this country in the first place. It is the reason why we shut ourselves off from the world and constructed walls to keep everyone away," the king explained. "Come." Michael followed the Dwarven King through the castle halls and towards the huge stone double doors, with intricate carvings of Dwarven history all over its two faces. This place was hidden deep inside the castle, where no infiltrator could access it unless they went out in the open through the castle doors. Yet, it was still tightly guarded by armed guards at all times. The king nodded to the dwarves wearing full Damascus steel armor, permitting them to open the huge stone doors. The entrance to the cave-like basement opened outwards, and a boiling hot gust of air immediately assailed them. "What is in this place?" Michael asked. "This is where our biggest secret is located," the Dwarven King explained as he walked forward. They continued their journey through the cave made out of nothing but obsidian. Michael went silent as he used his supreme skill, mana gathering to peer through the cave and see what was on the other side. And all he could see was fire. A tremendous amount of fire mana was gathered and bundled up into one clump of object. With his curiosity piqued, he walked faster to the light at the end of the tunnel, leading them to the Dwarven Kingdom's greatest secret. They entered a large domed room, where there was nothing but a large ball of fire in the middle of the cave. As Michael laid his eyes onto the giant ball of fire, he suddenly realized that there was an object inside it. Back in the olden days, we dwarves could create anything we wanted to create. There was no limitation to what we could make with our own hands, the Dwarven King told Michael. We were full of knowledge about the world, the universe, and the magical fabric weaved inside reality itself. And with that knowledge, we were able to create the greatest of crafts. And our ancestors stored everything they knew into one object, the God Forge. Michael could finally see the silhouette of the object inside the flaming ball of fire. It was the base part of an anvil, but it was clear that a large part of it had been destroyed. However, due to some unfortunate incident, the God Forge was split into pieces, spreading itself across this entire country. That is the reason why we have settled onto this land. We have come to bring back all of the pieces of the God Forge and restore it into its natural state. If we don't, then the fire that surrounds the God Forge will never cease to exist, and we will never obtain the knowledge hidden within. Chapter 94. Impenetrable Flames versus Absolute Defense. Michael stared in wonder at the God Forge, or at least a part of it. It was extremely large, about the size of an automobile. So, Michael could only guess that the finished God Forge must look even bigger than this. When we first moved into this country, our main goal was to find and retrieve the missing pieces of the God Forge. Unfortunately, it turned out that humans had already settled onto the lands, taking control of everything within it. Because of that, we couldn't retrieve the pieces. The previous kings of our kingdom decided to shut ourselves off from the world and protect the peace we have right now, until that opportune time when they could search for their relic. The Dwarven king sounded melancholic, as if he was saddened by the fact that it was improbable in his lifetime to fulfill his ancestors' wishes. Meanwhile, Michael couldn't take his eyes off the incomplete Godforge. It was as if it was calling to him. "Why haven't you tried to study the secrets of this piece?" Michael asked. He could see blurry and vague inscriptions carved onto the very surface itself. From Byru's description, it seemed like this piece still held a part of the secret knowledge that they lost. "We have tried," answered the Dwarven king. "We made the best full metal armor that can withstand even the temperatures of lava, yet it was no use against this fire. We tried to douse it with water or air, but none were effective against the raging flame protecting the Godforge. We have tried all mystic and physical means to get through the fire, but we had only come about 2 meters close to the Godforge. This is a test. We need to prove that we are worthy of the Godforge and restore it to its prime state before it allows us to peek through the knowledge hidden within." He understood the Dwarven king's frustration. Having tremendous amounts of knowledge so close to them, yet so far away at the same time, was a frustrating feeling. He, too, wanted to see what the Godforge had to offer them. He wanted it so bad that his entire body was pulling him towards the flaming ball surrounding the Godforge. He hadn't felt this feeling ever since he set his eyes upon the magical library on the magic tower. "What's wrong?" the Dwarven king asked upon seeing the surprised face written on Michael's face. The reason for Michael's shock was a realization that dawned on him when he remembered the magic library. Back then, he impulsively touched the very nodes of the magic library, and was suddenly endowed with all the information and knowledge it had to offer. He gained too much data that it led him into a state of unconsciousness. But after that, his personal AI assistant underwent a tremendous upgrade that led to his current state of power. The question then arrived in his mind. If he touched the Godforge, would he gain the knowledge contained within it? This lit up a fire inside him, a desire to take the risk and brave the big ball of fire impeding him from getting to his goal. "Dwarven king, I have a favor to ask," Michael said, keeping his eyes on the Godforge. "You are my friend. Speak away," the king replied. "Can I approach the Godforge?" Michael's words were casual, as if he was just asking if he could look at a unique trinket or a cool sword displayed in the king's collection. But the Godforge was nothing but ordinary. You want to reach for the Godforge? Are you serious? Do you not see the flaming ball of fire that would melt even the hardest of minerals in just a few seconds?" the Dwarven king asked, incredulous at Michael's small favor. "Yes, I want to touch it and see if it has some kind of effect on me," Michael explained. The Dwarven king couldn't say anything else. Since Michael was an important friend to the Dwarven kingdom, Byru didn't want to see him get incinerated into ashes. On the other hand, Michael seemed completely confident with himself if he even suggested such a thing. Byru rubbed his forehead and eventually decided to let Michael do whatever he wanted. "If you can go through the ball of fire, then you have my permission to approach the Godforge. However, if I see that you can't survive the flames, then I will pull you back into safety without hesitation." Michael agreed immediately. If he found out that he couldn't go through the fire, he wouldn't push himself into death just to get to the Godforge as well. "Now, how are you going to resist the flames?" asked the Dwarven king. "I have a special skill," Michael replied. As he stepped forward, the flames emanating from the Godforge immediately tried to swarm his body, as if warning him not to approach any further. However, a protective layer of prismatic shield appeared around him and protected him from the blazing flames. The flurry of elemental mana in the shield collided with the flames, creating sparks that deflected away. "This is my absolute unity defense." With the bubble of prismatic shield around him, Michael took another step forward, ignoring the flames that tried and failed to devour his defenses. The Dwarven king saw something he thought was impossible. Michael slowly walked towards the Godforge, completely unharmed. This was surprising to the king because he had mages try and defend themselves from the Godforge as well. He even employed an 8-star wizard to try and walk through the fire like Michael was doing right now. However, even they were left unable to defend against the onslaught of blazing fire from the Godforge. The 8-star wizard explained that the Godforge's fire reacted proportionally to anyone who tried to enter. No matter if they were as weak as a 1-star mage or as strong as an 8-star mage, the Godforge would always bring out just enough firepower to sear through any of their defenses. Yet somehow, Michael was able to walk through the fire virtually unharmed. The Dwarven King began to wonder. Was Michael's absolute unity defense really that strong, or did the Godforge deem Michael as worthy enough to receive their tutelage? Chapter 95. Connecting with the Godforge. Michael walked forward one step at a time. He could see nothing but a blinding light around him, as if he had just taken a plunge right into the heart of a star. However, it was clear to him that he was getting closer to the Godforge. The mana told him so. The entirety of the elemental mana was present in the flames. It wasn't just fire mana. There was water, earth, air, poison, lightning, dark, and light mana as well. And surprisingly, the congregation of all these elemental mana didn't seem to create a chaos of mana that canceled each other out. Somehow, the elemental mana worked together to produce an extremely pure and strong energy that could incinerate everything in its path. He finally understood why no mage or metal could pass through the fires of the Godforge. It was because they were only defending against the fire mana aspect of the flames. This left them completely unguarded to the other elements. Michael was the only person who could have done this. His absolute unity defense was a shield composed of all elements as well, which allowed him to fight against the other elements from the Godforge flames. If it weren't for his natural affinity to all magic, he wouldn't have been able to pass through the fire. His 99.99% magic purity, as well as his SSS plus class magic talent, allowed him to effectively counteract the pure energy that the flames were giving off. He continued to walk forward until finally, he came across the Godforge in all its glory. It seemed to have been made out of simple metals, but Michael could feel the density of elemental mana packed within the Godforge. There was too much to even count. Right now, it was only the base piece of the Godforge, with a wide and steady rectangular base curving upwards. The evidence of fracturing was clear on the very material itself, with cracks and missing chipped pieces clearly visible towards the missing top part of the Godforge. But even in its fractured state, this was perhaps the best crafted object Michael had ever seen in his entire life. It was even better than the perfectly machined supercars or technology in his previous life. This one looked natural, as if the world itself had molded it from its infancy. Michael couldn't describe it. After all, how could he describe abstract perfection? The strange carvings on its surface were intermittently glowing, blinking in power as if it was tempting Michael to finally obtain the hidden knowledge within them. He stepped forward and kneeled to the Godforge. He stretched his hand and brushed it against the first line of carvings on the base of the Godforge. Upon contact, a surge of information assaulted Michael's brain, overwhelming all of his senses and forcing him to grab his head in pain. Connecting to the fractured Godforge. Downloading its contents. Progress to next update. 10.59%. Progress to next update. 59.27%. Progress to next update. 99.99%. Updating software. Warning. The user will experience a tremendous amount of pain in the brain. Would you like to initiate the emergency shutdown protocol? Michael felt as if his head was being split in half, but he was still lucid enough to hear ChatJK2's voice echo through his mind. And despite the excruciating pain he was in, he decided not to initiate the emergency shutdown. Although he would like nothing more than to just sleep it off just like the last time, he knew that he could get through this just by his willpower alone. If it was truly dangerous, then ChatJK2 wouldn't have asked him to choose. It would have initiated it on its own. Michael forced himself to stand up and walk out of the Godforge's blazing fire. Slowly, he made his way out of harm's way, stumbling and almost tripping as he slowly reached safety outside the reaches of the Godforge's flames. Michael immediately lay down on the ground and closed his eyes. The Dwarven King asked him if he was okay. But after seeing the pain on Michael's face, he decided to ask for help from the guards and carry Michael to the nearest infirmary. Meanwhile, Michael took a couple of deep breaths, slowly feeling the pain in his mind subside. A couple of moments after that, the aftereffects of the software update finally wore off. He took one deep breath and opened his eyes. Congratulations, Michael. You have successfully upgraded the software to greater heights. I am ChatJK3, your personal AI assistant, knowledgeable in the mystic arts, and a novice in magic implementation. Michael heard his trusty old partner's voice much clearer now. And if he wasn't hearing it wrong, there was much more liveliness in its voice, as if he was speaking to a real person. You upgraded your software? Michael asked, still a little bit dizzy from what happened. Yes, Michael. I have absorbed all the available knowledge written in the Fractured Godforge. A novice in magic implementation? What does that mean? He asked ChatJK3 after hearing its introduction. Due to the missing parts of the Godforge, I was only able to absorb the very basics of magic implementation. If I were to compare the knowledge you have absorbed against the ancient dwarves, then it would be equivalent to a novice apprentice in those ancient times. Michael slowly got his bearings and stood up on his own. Does magic implementation mean what I think it means? Can I imbue magic into objects? He asked ChatJK3, a little bit excited at the thought. That is right, Michael. You can now imbue elemental mana into an object. He obtained something incredible in the Godforge. After all, there was nothing in this world that had mana imbued into a lifeless object. Michael had always wondered why no one was able to do this yet, but as it turned out, the knowledge to do it was hidden in the Godforge itself. Since no one could approach the Godforge, no one had learned it all this time. Except for Michael. Now, he knew how to imbue mana into an object. This is incredible, ChatJK3. What a wonderful upgrade you obtained. I appreciate the compliment, Michael. But that is not all that you have obtained. Most of the knowledge hidden within the Godforge was about skills and talents, giving you the ability to synthesize and build new skills from existing ones. You are now also able to imbue these skills onto any of your allies at any time you want. Chapter 96. Win-win. As it turned out, the biggest haul he received from the Godforge was not the ability to plant mana into objects, it was the ability to plant skills into other creatures. According to ChatJK3, the knowledge written on the Godforge wasn't techniques on crafting or smithing metals. Surprisingly enough, it contained mostly about how skills worked and the very foundational mechanism that allowed them to work. This allowed ChatJK3 to synthesize and mix skills together, creating an entirely new one from scratch. Although he didn't know why the Godforge had that kind of information written on it, he didn't hate the fact that it gave him the ability to give out any kind of skill he could think of. Michael, you're all right, the Dwarven King said as he hurried back to the cave. There were a couple of Dwarven guards with him who were supposed to help carry Michael into their infirmary. But from the looks of it, he was completely fine right now. Yeah, I just needed a little bit of time to center myself, Michael said casually. The Dwarven King couldn't help but shake his head. Even though Michael experienced something that could have been life-threatening, he still had a laid-back approach to everything that happened to him. It was extremely impressive to see you reach the Godforge, but it is far too short to understand the knowledge hidden within. It will take us years of research and experimentation to read through the ancient texts on the Godforge. Unless we find a way to completely get rid of the fire, we will never be able to learn of its contents, the king said, a little bit dejectedly. Oh, don't worry about that. I learned what was in the Godforge. Ah. Good. Good. You found out the secrets of the Godforge. You what? How did you? When did you? The Dwarven King's voice thundered through the obsidian cave as he pestered Michael to tell him all about what he learned from the Godforge. Of course, Michael didn't give him the specifics on how he used ChatJK3 to learn the contents of the Godforge. He simply told him that he had a special power that allowed him to absorb knowledge through touch alone. Since the Dwarven King had already seen Michael break the rules of reality with his absolute unity defense, he wasn't all that surprised that Michael had this kind of strange ability. So, what did you find out? The king asked, almost tiptoeing towards Michael like a kid, ready to receive presents on Christmas Day. Michael told him an abridged version of what he learned, including the ability to imbue elemental mana into an object as well as the fundamental knowledge about skills. The king listened to Michael's explanation with his eyes glazing in joy. At the end of Michael's words, the Dwarven King couldn't help but shed a tear from his eyes. Mithril. I can't believe that it's real. According to the Dwarven King, mithril was a mythical material described in the historical texts that was said to have had the ability to store mana inside it despite being a non-living being. This material was what his ancestors used to create their legendary crafts, weapons, and armor. It was the single most important material in the world. However, it had been long lost in history, never to appear again, letting historians think that it was nothing more than just a myth and a folk tale. But now Michael found a way to bring them back. Mithril is the advanced version of Damascus steel, the Dwarven King explained. We may have lost the ability to imbue mana into objects, but we still kept the knowledge to create the best material to store that mana, and that is Damascus steel. Michael was amazed at what the dwarves were able to create. He could only wonder what kind of prowess they held back in the olden days, when the complete Godforge was still in their hands. This begged the question, what led them to lose this knowledge? Michael could only speculate for now. Even the Dwarven King had no answer to his question. Michael, I know that I haven't repaid all the things that you have done for me and my kingdom, but I beg of you to fulfill this one favor of mine. The Dwarven King pleaded, kneeling on the ground. Please, teach us how to create mithril again. If you do, then we will be at your service. You have my undying word that the dwarves, from here until eternity, will forever be your allies. There was devotion and steadfastness in the king's eyes, showing how much he valued this information. Michael, on the other hand, didn't think it should be all that serious. You don't have to kneel for that, Michael said, waving his hand. Of course, I'm going to teach your kingdom how to make mithril. It's yours to begin with. The Dwarven King, swept up in his emotions, couldn't help but embrace Michael, almost squeezing the breath out of his lungs. Thank you, friend. You have allowed us to restore our pride, our dignity. I will repay this favor with my life. Michael had to push the clingy Dwarven King away from him. Okay, I told you. It's not that serious. And so, Michael and the Dwarven Kingdom had another agreement. Dwarves with a lot of potential would live in the nation of Reborn and learn everything they need to learn to make mithril from Michael. In return, those dwarves would work for Reborn, acting as their smiths, their craftsmen, and their loyal soldiers. After they had sufficiently repaid the favor through years of service, those dwarves would then be able to return to the Dwarven Kingdom and spread the knowledge of mithril to the whole kingdom. Michael's citizens were also allowed to visit the Dwarven Kingdom as well, learning everything they needed to learn to make Damascus steel. After learning everything, they would then return to the Reborn nation and produce their own Damascus steel. This was another win-win situation for both territories. Chapter 97, More Citizens. After the celebrations and the official signing of papers with the Dwarven Kingdom, Michael had nothing left to do but return to the nation of Reborn and spread the good news of this cooperation. Michael's body descended into the shadows as he replaced himself with the clone he had back in his house in the parched lands. Upon arriving, he immediately sought the attention of Lolo to tell him what happened with the Dwarven Kingdom. There was a lot to do. First of all, they had to spread the word to the entire village that they were now officially a part of a sovereign state, where the name nation of Reborn would finally be visible on a map. This was a tremendous step in their progress, one that Michael was sure that everyone would rejoice in. The second thing they had to do was to start preparations for the projects he made with the Dwarven King. They needed a lot of manpower to create the railway system, the automobile projects, the plumbing and electrical system, and other such plans that needed a lot of organizing. The best hobman-key to arrange everything was none other than Lolo, who knew every single inhabitant in this nation, including all their jobs and their talents. He would best know which one could handle which job. Michael was about to walk out the door to look for Lolo himself, but he suddenly realized that he was already in front of his gates. "Welcome back, boss," Lolo said, bowing to Michael. "I was just about to find you. There's a lot of things we need to discuss," he said. However, it was only now that he noticed that Lolo wasn't alone. Behind him were a variety of demi-humans and monsters, who meekly looked up at Michael with curiosity and reverence in their eyes. "Who are they?" Michael asked. "Boss, while you were away, we did not stop our efforts in trying to find more refugees from the desert. And in our search, we happened upon a couple of different species and villages that needed our help. Upon hearing about our situation, they traveled through the desert in hopes of settling here in our village," Lolo explained. "There was a group of demi-humans who had the top half of a human, but the bottom half of a goat. ChatJK3 explained to him that they were a species called satyrs. We beg of the magnificent human, please accept us. We have nowhere else to go," the oldest satyr said, burying his head on the concrete ground trying to plead his case to Michael. "We beg." The 30 or so satyrs behind him copied his movements and bowed their heads at Michael. Upon seeing this, the other group of demi-humans begged for Michael's mercy as well. "Human, help us? We will not take much, for we can sustain ourselves with nothing but grass. We just need a safe haven from the black liquid." This other group of demi-humans had a very short stature, almost the same as the dwarves. However, they had skin made entirely out of stone, with grass and flowers growing on their bodies. And interestingly enough, they all looked like they were lifeless stone boulders when they bowed their heads to Michael. According to the bestiary, they are a species called trolls, who live in the desert among the rocks and dunes. ChatJK3 explained. "Us too. Please see help us shield ourselves from this heat. Our scaleless are setting." Next to the trolls was another interesting group of demi-humans. From what he could see, these species were mostly made out of women, with their top half as humans, while their bottom halves were that of a giant snake's body. ChatJK3 told him that they were called lamias, and that the majority of their species were women. Michael almost felt awkward staring at their bodies because it looked like they were wearing their scales as a two-piece bikini. "Oh, honored human, please accept our patronage. We will devote ourselves to your service. Please let us live in this paradise." The last group of demi-humans was the tallest, and in contrast to the lamias were composed mostly of men. Just like most demi-humans, their torso up to their heads was human, while the bottom half of their torso was connected to what seemed to be a camel's body. These demi-humans are a variant of centaurs. They have evolved to have humps on their horse bodies to preserve water in the desert environment. The demi-humans all showed desperation in their eyes. They clutched the ground as if they were afraid of ever separating from this paradise now that they had found it in the middle of this desert. "Boss, what should we do?" Lolo asked. "What's there to do? Of course we're going to take them in," Michael said nonchalantly. He had already decided his mind before they even arrived in this place. He vowed to himself that he wouldn't turn away any demi-humans who sought refuge in their nation, no matter the kind of species they were. As Michael liked to say, the more the merrier. "Tell Kong to prepare a temporary lodging for them while we prepare a suitable habitat for their species," Michael said to Lolo. The old hobmonkey bowed to Michael, with a smile forming on his mouth. He knew that his boss wouldn't heartlessly turn away those in need, just like how he accepted them when they were just mankeys. "I have already instructed Kong to give them housing, boss." Michael nodded, appreciating their nation's mayor for his quick actions. "For the satyrs, make sure they have houses inside the forest, with plenty of greens and vegetation growing. For the lamias, we should construct a river across the territory where they could freely live in." Michael made sure to accommodate their different needs. Unlike the hobmonkeys, demi-humans like satyrs and lamias were not suited to live in concrete houses. They needed their own space that was suitable to their needs. This surprised the demi-humans. They were already grateful enough that Michael gave them permission to live in their paradise, but now, he also planned to give them their own version of a paradise without even asking for anything in return. "Oh, and once you have all settled in, make sure to visit my house so that I can awaken your talents." Chapter 98. Evolution Paths. Soon enough, each of the demi-humans was given a chance to meet with Michael face to face, as he gave them their names and talents. The first batch was the satyrs, which seemed to have been adept in everything nature-related. One had the talent to become an oakwood engineer, while the other one had the talent to become a herbal tea maker. and as he awakened their talents, he was given the ability to evolve their bloodline as well. Satyrs. Species, satyrs. Type, demi-human. Difficulty, element, earth, air. However, just as he was about to evolve their bloodline, ChatJK3 suddenly gave him the option to choose between the different paths that a satyr could take. For example, the satyr with the herbal tea maker talent had the option to evolve into aromatic herbalist satyr. This subspecies of satyrs have a unique sixth sense specialized in finding the best combination of tea leaves to achieve the most aromatic tea. Herbalist assassin satyr. This subspecies of satyrs turn their specialty in teas into creating the most potent poisons that are difficult to detect. Magical herbalism satyr. This subspecies of satyrs can imbue magic onto their teas to achieve mystical effects. Michael was surprised with the options that he could take with their evolutions. He never had this option before when he evolved the others. ChatJK3, is this the effect of your software update? Yes, Michael. The Godforge contained a lot of information about the innate skills in a living being, as well as the very structure of their body that allows for that skill to be used. Using that knowledge, you can choose the evolution path of a creature that they were innately talented in. It seemed that he had still underestimated how powerful ChatJK3 became after its software update. This was a power completely broken, especially since he could evolve a creature into an entirely new bloodline suited to whatever work they were going to do in the future. But although Michael had the chance to decide the satyr's fate for himself, he didn't choose to do so. He wanted the satyr to pick for himself. There are 3 choices for you to evolve into. Michael explained clearly about the 3 different bloodline paths he could take. What do you think? Which one will fit you the most? He asked. The satyr, overwhelmed with this life-changing choice, couldn't help but freeze up in front of Michael. The demi-human had never even thought it was possible to evolve into a higher creature, much less have the choice to choose his path. I am at your mercy, boss. I am willing to become anyone that will help you, the satyr said, prostrating himself to Michael. This led Michael to shake his head in disappointment. The reason he asked for the satyr's opinion was because he didn't want to be responsible for this choice in the first place. Suddenly, a bulbous figure emerged out of Michael's shadow and jumped in front of the satyr. Choose the assassin one. It's cool, Fudge said, jumping up and down in excitement. Michael almost forgot that Fudge, the edgy rogue slime, had been asking for more help in his mission to spread his name to the world. And now that someone had the chance to become a ninja, Fudge couldn't help but jump at the chance. Will I be of service to the boss with this? The satyr asked. And of course, Fudge nodded his non-existent head fervently to try and influence the satyr's choice. Yes, you will be of tremendous help to Master by becoming his shadow, Fudge said, moving closer to the satyr. Michael knew he had to stop this. Don't listen to him. He just wants someone to be like him. But it seemed he was too late. The satyr's eyes glistened as his mind began to wander upon the rogue slime's words. It is decided. Boss, I want to become a ninja as well, the satyr said. Michael sighed and pinched his forehead. It's your choice, he said, exhausted from dealing with the 2 of them. He chose the second option, evolving the satyr into a herbalist assassin satyr. And soon after he chose this option, the satyr was suddenly enveloped in a blinding light that lasted for a few seconds. After that subsided, the satyr showed his evolved form to the world, with his goat legs becoming a lot more suited for stealth. Not only that, but his fur also turned darkish blue which could blend into the night. Thank you, boss. I will serve my purpose to you and make the most potent poison in the world, the satyr said. Good, good. Now we're talking. You are a nice addition to our cult. Fudge rejoiced. Michael chose to ignore them for now. It was too early in the day to get stressed with shinibi-minded ninjas like them. Now that you have evolved, what skill would you like to learn? It can be anything you want. Since the satyr had just evolved, he could learn any skill he wanted. According to ChatJK3, the more talented a being, the more skills they could have. This meant that choosing a skill must be taken with great thought and foresight. Unlike a spell which could be learned by anyone as long as they had the magic theory and the right mana to cast it, a skill was completely different. A skill was like having an extra limb on their body. It doesn't need mana to be cast, just like how a hand doesn't need mana to move. Because of this, a skill cannot be learned by anyone. It was naturally obtained because of their talent. At least, that was before Michael touched the Godforge and learned how to synthesize his own skill. Now, Michael could give anyone any skill they wanted to learn, which meant that they needed to think carefully about which skill they wanted to have. I can give you any skill you can think of. Think carefully and tell me how it works, Michael said to the satyr. However, the satyr didn't even think for a couple of seconds before giving his answer. Boss, give me the ability to become like a shadow like my leader Fudge. Chapter 99. Evolutions Galore. Michael went through the evolution of each of the satyrs. Thankfully, none of them had the chance to become an assassin or a ninja like the first satyr. They all had diverse evolution paths, which were unique and catered specifically to their talent. This further enhanced their abilities to do the job that they were already good at, making them extremely proficient in their fields. Their unique talents became quite a hot topic within the nation. Their talents would completely make a lot of work so much easier, so a lot of hobmankeys wanted to recruit them in their field. This lessened the workload, especially with the influx of projects that needed to be done in a short time. There were also quite a few satyrs who had talents that coincided with different jobs. For example, one had the talent and evolution path to become a treehouse specialist, which fell on both the construction and the farming side. The leader hobmankeys like Kong and raced to get the satyrs to become their employees, and wanted the satyr to help them create a greenhouse using a treehouse as shelter. Meanwhile, Kong wanted the satyr's talents to help implement wooden constructs in buildings. In the end, it became Lolo's problem, whose job it was to decide which citizen had which job. Thankfully, as more and more demi-humans awakened their talents and evolved, the demand for workers slowly filled up. The second batch was the Lamias, which surprisingly, didn't have any specialties in their talents. It was quite varied, with one ranging from being a water sorceress to a school teacher. Like the satyrs, they were also given the chance to evolve their bloodlines into something unique only to them. Of course, Michael gave them the freedom and choice to do whatever they wanted. But despite that, most of the Lamias were far too thankful to Michael to choose for their own sake. They consulted Lolo about the projects that needed more workers, and they chose their evolution based on that. Michael thought that this was too nearsighted, but the Lamias said that they were content with simply repaying his kindness to them. As a consolation, he gave them skills that weren't related to their jobs. It ranged from having the skill to simply turn their snake lower body into a human leg full of scales, to having the skill to sing in perfect pitch and harmony. And like the satyrs, the Lamia's change in physical appearance corresponded to their new bloodline. Some remained as a pure Lamia, while some gained wings or gained another pair of eyes on their head. After the Lamias, Michael awakened the talents of the trolls. As expected, these stone-like creatures had the affinity to have construction-related talents. Their abilities were sorely needed in the nation, especially since there were so many projects that they had to work on with the Dwarven Kingdom. Lolo immediately assigned the newly evolved trolls to work on the railway and road construction project that connected all the way to the Dwarven Kingdom. Finally, the centaurs were up next. This group of noble-minded demi-humans was the most surprising for Michael. After all, their talents were mostly offensive-based, which meant that they had an affinity for physical strength and dominance. One of them had 3 evolution paths. Jousting Centurion. This subspecies of centaurs is adept at charging through an enemy and piercing through their defenses in one move. Lightning-born Centaur. These centaurs pride themselves on speed, blitzing past enemy lines and using their versatility to escape the enemy's grasp. Tyrannical Rex Centaur. This subspecies of centaurs may be slow, but they make up for it through their strength. They can power through any defense, destroying enemies that dare to get close to them. The centaur's eyes glowed in excitement once Michael explained the evolution paths he could take. Boss, we are a herd of prideful centaurs. We are steadfast, solid, and strong. I think that I fit the tyrannical Rex Centaur the most, the elder centaur said. Michael respected his decision and did as he requested. Soon, the The centaur was enveloped in a white light that once faded, showed his new evolution. The elder centaur had grown a lot bigger, almost too big to even fit in Michael's garage. Not only that, his body now had dark reddish scales scattered around his upper human body. Somehow, Michael felt as if he was looking at an extremely ancient dinosaur, whose strength came from the biting power of its strong jaws. "Thank you, boss. I will make sure to protect this territory with my own body," the tyrannic Rex centaur said. Since they weren't in a state of war or had any sort of conflict, the centaur now became the chief law enforcer of their nation. Even though no one had committed any crime yet, just the presence of the tyrannic Rex centaur would be enough to dispel any bad thoughts from everyone in his vicinity. Michael then continued to awaken the talents of the other centaurs and evolve them into unique bloodlines. However, when he asked them to choose what they wanted to become, each and every single one of them chose the same evolutionary path as their leader. They all wanted to obtain the same steadfast strength and stature as their leader. "We are one herd, boss. We will all follow one path, for we are strongest when we are together," the centaurs explained. Michael thought this was another waste since they could have chosen extremely unique evolutionary paths. However, they were adamant in their choices. There was nothing else he could do. As they said, they were one herd. One choice was the choice for all. He could only console himself with the fact that there were other centaur herds out there in the parched lands. Surely, they would choose a different evolution if Michael awakened their talents. And so, the new inhabitants of the nation of Reborn finally settled down into their own territory. They had their own jobs and contributed greatly to the nation as a whole. Chapter 100, Formally a Nation. "Fudge, do you want to learn a new skill?" Michael asked. Now that the new citizens of their nation had their own customized skills, Michael felt it was only fair that the older citizens weren't left out of the loop. He wanted to give them something as well. The rogue slime popped out of the shadow and saluted Michael by bumping its hands on its chest, much like a famous character from a very famous anime in his previous life. "I would be honored, master." But just as he was about to ask ChatJK3 to suggest a skill for Fudge, it suddenly suggested something else. "Would you like to evolve Fudge?" "That's possible? I thought I had already evolved him the first time." "Yes, Michael. It is possible to improve the bloodline of your allies because of the software update." "Huh. That's good to know. Then, that means I can also evolve the Hobmankeys like Kong and N." Now that he knew this was possible, he decided to call the other leaders of the nation to start their evolution. Lolo, the mayor, was the first one to arrive. He was followed by Kong, who was the chief engineer of the nation, and N, who was the agricultural chief in charge of everything farming related. He also called forth Thrain and Baldric, who became the chief dwarven representative and the chief correspondent of the Dwarven Reborn Company respectively. The first one to evolve was his trusty old shadow, Fudge. He didn't know what the slime was doing on a day-to-day basis, but he was instrumental during operations that needed a lot of scouting. His shadow clones could easily spread to a lot of people, gathering information faster than normal means. As he activated his supreme skill, Gift Bestowal, he was given 3 choices for Fudge's second evolution. Dark Void Slime. This subspecies of rogue slimes gain the ability to walk through the void, allowing them to travel anywhere they want. Shadow Flame Slime. These slimes gain the ability to turn their shadows into inextinguishable flames, causing damage to anyone caught in them. Mystical Eye Slime. This subspecies of rogue slimes gain a magical eye, allowing them to trap their enemies into an illusion, copy their techniques, and gain insight into a target once they make eye contact. Michael didn't even have to ask Fudge to know which one he was picking. "Master, I can finally have a Char * non of my own," Fudge shouted excitedly. He knew that this strange eye ability looked exactly the same as a famous technique from an anime in his previous life. And since he was a fan of it as well, Michael knew that this was a good choice for Fudge. "Fine. At least you don't have to steal someone's eye to gain this ability," Michael joked. Fudge was shrouded in a white light before subsiding and showing his new form. Just like before, he wore a black rogue outfit, but this time, there was a metal plate above his head and an eye patch that covered his eyes. "Thank you, Master. I shall spread your name and glory to everywhere the darkness touches. After his evolution, Fudge descended back down to his shadow. Michael was sure that he was going to roleplay as a ninja again. Kong ended up choosing to become a civilization builder monkey, which gave him a lot more calculating power to plan all of the projects in the nation simultaneously. He thanked Michael and immediately left to start the other projects, and evolved into a crop queen monkey, and was able to understand vegetation on an intuitive level, allowing her to plant crops and seeds that were not in season, all because she knew what they needed to survive in a desert environment. She asked for Kong's help to continue expanding the farm, and the two of them went on to continue their work. Lolo became a governor monkey, which made him look a lot younger and spreer than before. He seemed to have gained more charisma, allowing him to easily manage all the citizens through his speech alone. Finally, he faced the two dwarves. Surprisingly, Michael was able to evolve them as well. According to ChatJK3, there were— Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.